Good evening all, and welcome. There are some very sick people in this world who don't have good intentions for you. Let's find out what they had in store for others. So get comfortable and let the darkness take control. This was 2 to 3 years ago in India, and my father and I were driving home from a wedding. I don't know how much you all know about weddings over here, but this was a 3-day event that involved the entirety of 2 middle-of-nowhere nothing villages. It was a huge deal, and we were the only white people the majority of these folks had ever seen. So beyond the bride and grooms themselves, we were the best guests. This meant near constant attention, no relaxation or any time to ourselves, and sleep came in the form of a concrete slab of a bed with a thin blanket over it, nestled snugly in between apparently every drunk uncle the village could hold, all passionately arguing for hours about something in Hindi. I think it was maybe the music, which also constantly blared from the concert-sized speakers through the whole village. It was safe to say by the time we left the wedding, we were already extremely sleep-deprived and out of it. This isn't even the fun part though. Through an odd chain of events that isn't totally related to this story, while driving home on the single-lane road that had traffic in both directions, dodging donkey carts, groups of scooters, and other drivers at 120 kilometers per hour, we get in a head-on collision. I remember realizing what was going to happen a few seconds before it did, closing my eyes, loosening my body, and making sure my tongue would be okay. And then bam, the world turned upside down, and again and once more. Our car flipped 4 times, landing down in an overgrown field near the spot of the accident. The other car was mostly gone, and what was left of it was still on the road. Glass everywhere. My dad was unconscious, my clothes ripped to shreds, and there were voices all around me. I remember being extremely confused and dazed, and I hurt. Why did I hurt? Dozens of people had apparently stopped to flip the car back over to help the American tourist out. A few people pulled me out through the left-hand broken window and immediately went back in to help my father on the driver's side. I, extremely confused, exhausted, and scared, and most likely concussed, which I later found out is definitely concussed, wandered over to the road and the other demolished car. I could hear a siren in the distance. An ambulance? The cops? I didn't pay attention. Where were my shoes? Suddenly a man had his arms around my shoulders and I was ushered into an unknown white car a small distance away from the wreck. "I will take you to the hospital," he said. "Where's my father?" He ignored me. "He is fine, come on." He pushed me forward, and in a daze I followed, asking about my things, my shoes and my dad. All I had was my phone, which was still in a death grip in my hand. He ignored me. "Do not worry, hurry, get in the car." I did as I was told, though I remember asking a few more times about my shoes. I was limping barefoot. I remember being forced on my right foot. How it wouldn't work, basically ignoring the guy guiding me away from the accident and the rest of the people. Why did it hurt so much, and where was my bag? The man urged me forward some more, making promises that my things were fine and that he had them already and just to get into the car. I was barely paying attention, slowly moving forward. Where was my dad? At that point, I guess, the man decided I wasn't moving fast enough. He wrenched my phone from my hand, maneuvered me into the back seat and slammed the door behind me. He was walking around the driver's side when an ambulance pulled up. I struggled with the door, saying I'll get the ambulance instead. But my dad must be there, and where are my things? "No!" He slammed the door again, locking it this time. "Be quiet." At this point I started crying, and was still confusedly trying to open the locked door, blubbering that I needed my things. He insisted he was helping me out, and to shut up. He rushed around, opened the driver's side door, and was about to get in when I heard an almost roar-like sound erupt to my left. Suddenly my father was there, bleeding, limping, ignoring the chaos, and angrier than I'd ever seen him. "Get my daughter out of your car." He grabbed the man who was halfway in the vehicle at that point and threw him to the ground, unlocked the backseat door and rushed around to pull me out. "Dad, where are my shoes? Does he still have my phone?" I obviously asked to thin air, as my dad was already back a few feet away shouting, hands around the man's throat demanding my phone. With a terrified look, the man pulled it out his pocket and threw it several feet away, causing my dad to drop him onto the pavement in one swift motion and bound after the device. After that point, the man hurriedly climbed into his car and sped away, while I made my way back to the waiting ambulance, still not ready processing what just happened. My dad materialized on the bench next to me a few seconds later, my cracked phone in hand, and enveloped me in a hug while saying how scared he was. The paramedics moving all around us, securing everything and preparing for the drive to the hospital. Everything after that is a story for another time. But to the random Indian man who most likely tried to take me from my parents at the scene of an accident, let's never meet again. A few years ago, I was 17, just graduated high school, and got my first job at a Christian camp near Yosemite in California over the summer. Mainly the people I worked with were great, really sweet Christian college kids. The good kinds. There was one guy though, Carl, who I frankly did not like. Carl was tall, handsome, and charming. He had curly golden brown hair and a smile that could stop your heart. His eyes, though, were dead. He never got those little crinkles around the corner of his eyes when he smiled. It was like the top half of his face was just dead. There were things I didn't like about Carl right off the bat. His eyes for one, that dead smile of his. He also never asked for anything. He tried to twist your arm. He just very softly, very slowly tried to manipulate the situation until you almost felt like you owed him. Each time, it felt like a part of my brain shut down, like it slammed a door shut, and there was a very clear feeling of, no, this is not right. Save him some food, but do not walk out into the woods to give it to him. Something is wrong. I got along with most of the little cliques at camp. No one really disliked each other as far as I knew. We just kind of broke off into groups based on what we liked to do in our free time or who we worked with the most. Carl, though, seemed to make friends on a one-to-one within a clique. By the time he left the group, it was decimated. They were fighting, not speaking, and didn't trust each other. I know this isn't a lot of evidence, but I'm just trying to paint a picture of what a type of man he was. One day, everyone in camp wanted to go to Fresno. We were tired of camp food and wanted real dinner, maybe see a movie or go bowling. I was off work last. Now at camp we had a sign-out sheet. Being so close to Yosemite, we often went hiking. So if we left, we had to put our name down, along with where we were going, when we left, and when we should be expected back. This way, if something happened, they would know when to start looking for us. So I put in all my info on the sheet and headed down to the parking lot. My friends had all divided up into their cars. I didn't drive and jokingly asked if they'd forgotten about me. They said Carl had said I could ride with him. I looked around and didn't see him, although I had seen his name on the sign sheet. All the hair on my body stood on end. I was terrified to get into the car with this guy, alone. He felt so wrong, so off, just not right. I don't know how else to put it. My friends were telling me I had nothing to be worried about and it would be fine. I saw Carl walking to the parking lot. that dead smile on his face, and everything in me was screaming not to get into the car. I said that I was tired and wanted to stay in tonight, and Carl laid in the charm on thick, telling me what a good night it would be. I owed him because of God knows what, flashing that dead smirk. I refused. He got angry and told me I didn't need to be such a bitch about it, and I thought we were friends. Finally, everyone figured out that I wouldn't be persuaded. I hugged one of my girlfriends goodbye and whispered in her ear not to ride back with Carl under any circumstances. When they all left, I walked back to the area with the sign-out sheet to cross my name off, since obviously I wasn't going anywhere. I saw the sheet where my name was, and my heart dropped. My name had already been erased. When I was 9, I went to a school that was in a village nestled in the English countryside. It was a small, quiet, close-knit community where everyone knew everyone else's business. It was very cliquey actually, but anyway, it wasn't unusual for groups of children to roam around the village unaccompanied. Obviously, this is a no-no to most people nowadays, but this was the late 90s to early noughties, and in a village where literally the only big crimes in a 20-year period were an illegal rave in a barn and some guy setting his van on fire for the insurance money. Across the street from the front entrance of my school was a narrow dirt lane that turned into a bridleway at the end. It only had a few houses along it, and about halfway up was a park. It wasn't a weird park or anything. There was a playground and a large playing field around it, which backed onto farmland that stretched on for miles. I didn't have any friends at school until I was around 8, and the ones I did had known each other since they were infants, so I was kind of out of the loop. I had moved away from the village when I was 7 to another one about a 15-minute drive away, and my mum didn't know many of their parents as she wasn't from the area. She also liked to take me straight home after school rather than leave me to play with my friends in the village. If my mum drove all the way out to pick me up, she'd be annoyed to leave me and then have to come out again. This was also before everyone had a phone, so I never had any way of calling her either, as I was too shy to ask a friend if I could use their landline. However, I happened to live in a flat above one of my friends, who I often played with in the countryside surrounding our house. This occurrence took place on one of the few times I spent a longish period in the village outside of school, and of course it would be creepy. So it was my friend Lewis's 10th birthday, and he had a party I was invited to. We had the party with a few other kids, and then later on in the afternoon, most of them went home. After this, it was just me, my friend Hannah, my older brother who was also friends with Lewis, and I think 2 other kids from the village. We decided to go out and play. We went to the lake, the village hall, and around the churchyard, the World War II pillbox, and finally the park. It was a really fun day because we had literally no supervision at all. So there we were, playing army or something with sticks and toy guns, when suddenly my friends freeze and go silent. It stretched on for a few moments. I don't know why they had gone quiet, and I was asking what was going on, when suddenly they all started running into the trees. I had the urge to run with them, but despite being really confused, when we got there, we climbed up the trees and waited for quite a while. My friends looked out over the field to the area we'd just been playing in. Finally, Lewis and one of the other kids told me that the guy from the other week was back. He had been watching them from the park entrance. At first I couldn't see anything, but after a few moments of looking through the leaves, I saw this fat, bald, middle-aged guy who was wearing a white shirt standing at the edge of the main play area of the park, exactly where we'd just been playing. He was dressed like he'd just gotten off work or something. But he still looked really creepy, even from a distance. He stood there with his hands in his pockets, just staring at us across the field for literally half hour before he finally left. We calmed down a little and decided we should head home, as it was nearing sunset. I don't know if it was some kind of weird power trip for him or something, but it was certainly creepy, and I know we were right to run away. We returned to Lewis's house, taking the back way through the fields. Then after a while, my mum came to pick me, my brother, and Hannah up and take us home. It was really scary, but my friends didn't bother telling anyone about it. I don't think anything more happened with the guy after this, and my friends didn't speak of it again. However, it turned out that it wasn't the first time something like this had happened, and a while afterwards, I remembered something. About a week before this incident, I was in the lobby going up to the front door, and for some reason there were 2 police officers talking to my friend's mother at the entrance to their flat. I heard from my mum later on that Hannah's mother had called them after something weird had happened earlier that day. Apparently Hannah and a couple of kids from the village had been playing in the park after school when the creepy guy had shown up with a pair of really big, unfriendly dogs. He threatened to slit their throats or something to that effect and set the dogs loose on them. I'm not sure what breed they were, but apparently they were big and extremely aggressive. They chased my friends down, but they managed to flee to some trees lining the edge of the park and climbed up them to safety, and the guy and his dogs eventually left them alone. When they felt it was safe enough, they went to Lewis's house and explained to his mother what had happened. Lewis and Hannah's mother were really good friends who went way back, so she called Hannah and the other kid's mum to tell them what had happened. As far as I know, nothing much was done about it, which is weird to me considering this is a village that didn't have a big population. The police in my local area are kind of crap to say the least, but fortunately, we never encountered this weirdo again. I am more often than not mistaken for being much younger than I really am, especially in my late 20s and early 30s. I was frequently told by people that they thought I was about 10 years younger. I constantly had experiences where I was talked down to or inappropriately hit on. People also often tried to take advantage of me, not only because I was female, but because they perceived my age as much younger than I really was. Here's the story. My boyfriend and I were going shopping, and we walked into a dollar store. I hate to shop, and boyfriend likes to look at everything, so I usually go and gather all of our stuff while he putters around. I know, I also play video games and he does not. He cooks, I don't. Basically, he's the chick, I'm the dude. We split up, do our individual shopping, and this dapper little old man, probably in his late 60s, early 70s, comes up to me and holds out his arm like he expects me to take it. "Come on," he says. At first, this doesn't set off any alarm bells because he looks pretty harmless. Well-groomed, clean suit, decorative cane, even a jaunty little bowler hat with a feather in the brim. I figured he was a little confused and was mistaking me for either a store employee or family member. So I let him talk to me a little about the weather and such, and just when I'm about to make an excuse and be on my way, he holds out his arm and goes, "Come on," again. I'm sorry? I think you have me confused with someone else. Are you looking for someone? He starts chatting again, and during this chat he asks me if I have a job. All the while, he's slowly and subtly gravitating to the front of the store. I'm a little thick sometimes, I'll admit, and I answered honestly that I didn't. I was taking time off for health issues. He gets very close like in my face and whispers something vague about how he has all kinds of work at his house that he needs done, and he's sure he can find something for me to do at his house. and then he tips me a wink. Oh, hell no. I stay cool, and with my smile never faltering, I tell him I'm very lucky that I have a husband who supports me. Luckily, boyfriend picked that exact moment to step around the corner or to peer at the end of the aisle. As a matter of fact, here he comes now. As soon as he heard husband, the little old man's expression instantly changed. He went from friendly, happy-go-smiley grandpa dude to pissed off, scary creeper guy. He disappeared so quickly that I began to suspect he teleported. I never even saw where he went. He was gone that fast. I would have written it off as just a poor elderly gentleman who'd maybe gotten a bit confused until I saw that wink. It was further cemented by the instant change in his expression. He was not confused. It was definitely an act. I've been hit on by men of inappropriate age before and laughed it off. This wasn't that. This was straight up creepy, and I shudder to think what he had in mind with me. In 2015, I made the move from my town in England to Washington State. I moved to an area that was small enough to not really get any tourists, and it made my accent stand out a lot. I was fairly used to people doing a double take as soon as I opened my mouth, but this time was a little different, and it seriously shook me up. I'm a female, and was 20 at the time. It was around 1 a.m., and I was letting my dogs out before I went to bed. Unfortunately, my wife and I didn't have a fenced yard, or even a backyard. Our younger dog has to be taken out on a leash, meaning I had to take them for a super small walk. I opened the door, and Bailey, the older dog, goes plodding off. Gremlin tugging on her leash. Hold on, I say to her, laughing. I walk down the steps and take them to the side of the house to our front yard. A gentleman turns the corner and stops. Your dogs are lovely. I turn to look at him and smile. Thank you so much. He does the double take and comes closer to me. I love your accent. Are you Australian? I laugh and explain that I'm English, while Gremlin comes over to him for some attention. What's your favorite kind of dog? Pugs, I tell him enthusiastically. I love them. The guy stands up. This is where it gets creepy. I have a pug. I react happily, asking the usual dog questions when he suddenly steps even closer right into my personal space. You should come meet my dog. He's staring at me intently, and now I'm pretty uncomfortable. I politely decline, saying I was about to head to bed, and moving on to our little yard and closer to the property. The man follows me, keeping the uncomfortable closeness. I only live up the street. Come meet my pug. Again, I decline, to which I start to walk into the house. There's a part of me that doesn't want to open the door, in fear that he pushes his way in. However, I don't manage to get to the front door. He corners me against the side of my house, grabbing my arm. Come with me. It's not a question. We won't be long. My heart is racing, and I can already tell I'm going to have bruises from his tight grip. The man now tries to pull me, but I plant my feet firmly. No, please get off my property and let me go. I will shout so my boyfriend will come running. So cliche, but I don't know what else to do. It doesn't work. He pulls harder, actually making me move a few steps forward. Come with me now. No, I say loudly, despite knowing no one will come hear me as my wife works night shift. That's when Bailey, my wife's 10-year-old Cocker Spaniel, jumps off the porch where he had been patiently laying, waiting to be let back in. Never before have I heard her growl, but that night I did. Bailey bares her teeth, snarling at the man, shoveling her way between us. Gremlin picks up on Bailey's attitude and joins him by yapping at the man. He lets me go and takes a few steps back with shake obviously written on his face. Bailey, get him! I say it like it's a command she might recognize, when really I might as well be telling her to read the paper. The fake command works, however, and the man takes off running. I bend down in tears and wrap my arms around Bailey, her little stump tail wagging madly as she looks at me for confirmation she did good. We head to the front door pretty quickly, and I double check that every door and window is locked before curling up with the dogs, treat bag in hand. So creepy stranger who wants me to meet his pugs, let's not meet again. I have 3 children. My middle child, my son, is the sweetest thing. He is compassionate and emphatic, which at his age of 3 is rare. When we go out in public, people take notice, especially if it's just him and I. He will talk your head off and has impeccable manners. It was during a last-minute shopping trip this takes place. One child was in school, the other was with my mum. So he and I had some alone time. I always treasure these trips because I get to experience his beautiful personality unfiltered. We go to the store and get what we need of the food section, then head to the toiletries. He is happy talking away, mostly about things relevant to him in his 3-year-old mind, telling me he's a superhero having to save a princess, asking to pick up something special for his brother and sister. All around, a cute kid. We go down the oral hygiene aisle and pick up some toothpaste. As we're leaving the aisle, I notice a man and a woman together. I'm assuming they're married. The woman continues on the aisle, where the man just stops to where my son and I are, and just stares. I figured he was listening to our conversation, as most people do. But seriously, this kid talks a lot. It didn't freak me out, but just made me more alert. So this guy, without prompting, says, "He's cute. Can I have him?" I was weirded out, but say, "Ha, no, I love my boy. I think I'll keep him." Well, that's too bad. I'm thinking that's going to be the end of our exchange, and I'm trying to give him the benefit of the doubt and assume he's joking, and didn't realize he was being creepy. At this point, my son sees a Batman toothbrush he must have, and I explain to him, yes, it might be the most amazing toothbrush ever, but I just don't have the money to buy another one right now. Being 3, he was obviously upset. End of the world type stuff. So the man completely bypasses me and comes up to my son. "What about this one? Do you like this one? If you lived with me, I'd get it for you." Now I'm completely freaking out. Who ignores the mother to talk to the child, offering him something he can't have? What did he expect? My son to say in front of me that he wants to go with the man, and I just let him? It was super weird. Him coming at my son like that? I gave him the full effect of, touch my kid, and I will make your face bleed. He sort of backs off, but doesn't go to join his wife. I'm super cautious when it comes to my kids, because my aunt was murdered by a serial killer. It has left this aura of fear, despair, and paranoia in my family, making something big out of something small. But I knew this was big. At this point, I'm like, screw it, and noped out of there. This guy very cautiously starts to follow us, going into an aisle when we're heading out. He was trying very hard to be nonchalant, staying a good ways behind us, so as to not arouse suspicion. But being hyper-aware for the reasons I just said, I took notice. I go down aisles I had already been down, and then go again. He followed us everywhere. What was he trying to do? Kidnap my kid in the middle of a crowded supermarket? After this dance of ours, I decided to head to the bathroom and hide out for a while. What do you know? He heads to the men's room. I get into the restroom and block the door with my body, meaning someone would have to knock before coming in. I figured if he tried to force his way in, I'd have a head start. I decided if he was still there when we got out, I would alert security. I could have handled him, if he decided to make his move, since I practice Muay Thai, but I really try not to use it if I can help it, because it can be a brutal art form. My son and I chill out in the bathroom for 45 minutes. I give him my phone to play around with, thinking of what my next move is, and all these horrible things this guy could have planned for my son. All the while, trying to imagine this guy's endgame. Abduct him in broad daylight? He would have to have known he'd get caught, because I'd make a huge fuss. Anyway, it ends anticlimactically, because when we left, the guy was gone. I just think how lucky we are that nothing happened, and that this guy wasn't more patient. I have no doubt in my mind he would have done something sinister after following us about and clearly being desperate for my kid. Rewind to early 2000s. I'm a junior in high school working my first job at a pizza place in a small one-horse town. My best friend, called Holly, lives right down the road from where I work and a few blocks away from our school. So I was over all the time at her parents' and we were totally cool. She has a weird older brother I didn't really care for and had a best friend called Michael. This friend Michael I'd met a few times in passing. They were always outside working on cars when I saw them at the house. It was always your typical teenage exchange. No flirting that I noticed, but I wasn't into either of them, so I wasn't giving them much attention. One day Michael breaks his leg, and apparently this kid had a bad home life or such, and Holly's parents offered up their house for his recovery, even though they were all going on vacation and no one would be there to help care for him. So Holly's mum, knowing I work a block away, asks if I can swing by after work to check on him. I was willing to do a favor for her and agreed, even though I knew I'd be dead by then. After a Saturday night of serving endless pies and Rockefeller oysters to a small town mix of Sons of Anarchy wannabes and 50-year-old sun-bleached alcos that talk way too close to your face. Fast forward to 2:15. I'm real tired, but on my way to Holly's to check on the guy. I don't really know at all. I come in and he's all set up on the couch watching TV. We greet each other and it's all smiles while we small talk for a bit, and then I ask him if he needs anything. He asked me to bring him a few things from the kitchen, food, water, whatever it was, and I made the mistake of sitting down in a chair and found myself unable to get up. I was so tired, I texted Holly and told her I was going to crash in her bed. I knew she wouldn't mind, and I'm pretty sure she had offered it to me beforehand anyway. He's chatting me up on the couch the whole time, and we're both kind of absently watching TV while I muster the energy to move. I get up, tell him I'm actually going to crash in Holly's room, and I'll see him in the morning to get him anything if he needs it before I go home. I go in, close the door, kick off my shoes, and just lay down on the top of her twin bed in all my clothes and passed out pretty quickly. What I wake up to about an hour later is a sort of jiggling around my waist. Also, out of my periphery, I see a dark figure crouching next to the side of my bed. I'm slowly waking up more each second, but I was pretty out of it. At first, I jolted upright and sort of panicked. I genuinely thought something was wrong for a minute. You know, for him to be in the room I was sleeping in. I said, "What's wrong?" As soon as I spoke, he shuffled around a lot because, guys, he's on crutches. He struggles to get back on and quickly leaves while muttering something along the lines of, everything's okay." I laid there propped upright, watching him as he shuffled out and closed the door behind him. As he did this, I came to the reality out of my sleeping fog. Wait, why was he in here? And was he just fumbling with my belt? I looked down. Sure enough, he had started to unfasten it. He must have been stealthily working on it for a few minutes for me to not wake up immediately. That's when the fear crept in. I checked the time, 4 a.m. Way too late to go to my parents. My parents had just gotten divorced, and if I showed up in the middle of the night, my dad would think I was out partying. It was a sore subject at the time, and I didn't want any more drama with them. I knew I wouldn't be able to convince him otherwise after I told him I was staying at Holly's, and didn't bother telling him about the whole Michael thing anyway. So in my eyes, I had nowhere to go. I began to doubt the whole thing. This couldn't be happening to me. And I thought since he'd been caught, he wouldn't dare try it again. So I just lay there for a few hours, go home a decent hour, and this nightmare would be over. Well, that's what I thought. I fall asleep again. I know, but I was scared and tired at 5 a.m. Take 2, to his shadow crouched near me once more. He's tugging even harder at my belt, and was more determined this time. I jolt up, backed against the wall, and didn't say a word. He just did this whole shuffle of picking up his freaking crutches and quickly shuffling out. No words exchanged. I think I was in shock. The fact that someone was just helping themselves to my sleeping body was one thing, but that he must have sat there contemplating it for a while and finally pulled up his crippled self from the bed rest and hovelled in there so quietly and thought he might get away with it. I was there to help out that arsehat and decided I had to get the hell out of there. So I crawled out of Holly's window and got into my car ASAP. I still felt I couldn't go home at 5 a.m. though, so I just parked by a close church in my back seat with the doors locked. The next day, I told Holly about it, and she told me that she would catch both Michael and her brother sneaking into her room at night and peeking in on her, changing and other pervy stuff. Sometimes I wonder if it took her this long to tell me that's what they've done. I wonder what she hasn't told me about. I didn't mention it to the parents or anything. Teenage girls don't tend to understand just how violated they were in certain situations and shake it off. So naive. I don't go over there often anymore, and never when I know her brother's home. We're still friends though. But to creepy Michael, let's not meet again, or I'll break your other leg. When I was 19, I was still living on the family ranch deep in the Texas brush country. My father had hired some men as extra hands, and they stayed in the little travel trailer near the main house. One night when everyone had gone out, I stayed home alone. Earlier, one of the men, a younger guy in his 20s, had tried to talk to me and flirt. I had no interest. I had a boyfriend at the time and ignored him. So jump to later that night, home alone. I find this guy at my living room window looking in at me. I was watching TV when I heard weird noises outside the window. We didn't have air conditioning. Summer nights are very cool, so we always had our windows open. I turn to look out the window, and when my eyes finally focus, I see that guy there. His face pressed against the window screen, making kissy lips, and by the obvious movement of his shoulder and breathing heavily, he was jacking off. I was freaking out. There was no one home. I run to the kitchen and grab a knife, and back to the window. But he's gone. A very long hour later, my folks show up, and I tell them everything. My father obviously is livid, goes to where they're staying, but the guy isn't there. The others say they hadn't seen him since earlier. We all calm down and figure he left on his own. My father has told the rest of them they will be leaving as well in the morning, and we all go to bed. In my room, I'm laying on my bed, which was just my queen mattress on my floor, a trend I was trying out, and it was right under the window. As I'm laying there trying to sleep, I hear this man's voice, "Hey, sweetie." And it was that guy at my window, trying to get in. I scream my lungs out. Both parents come running in. I'm sobbing hysterically, pointing to the window. With the lights on, you could see he had already torn the corner of the screen. My father runs out the house in his underwear, catches up with the guy trying to run, and beats the ever-loving crap out of him. We went to the trailer and started beating the crap out of the men there. They're obviously scared. They didn't really know what was happening. Then my dad goes into the house and grabs his firearm. It was a big one, and he stands there in the doorway of the travel trailer making sure everyone gets their stuff and leaves. Before they go, he pulls one aside and whispers in his ear. The man nods and writes something down on a piece of paper. It was a phone number, because that morning I heard my dad yelling into the phone about what happened and how it will never happen again, and the only reason he didn't kill the guy was because he didn't feel like digging a hole. For clarity, the men were illegal aliens, which my father always hired to help on the ranch. We live in South Texas, 4 hours from Mexico. My dad never had problems with them before, and I had grown up around them all my life. My father was also what is known as a coyote. He'd pick up or run the men to their next stop for a little bit amount of money, and was a well-known place to rest, work, and be transported to the next destination, usually Houston. So that leads up to my next point. It wasn't unusual to get randoms just showing up. My fiancé and I were camping, as we'd done many times at this particular state park. Everything was normal. Made some dinner on the fire, stayed up a bit, then let the fire die down and went into the tent to smoke a blunt of some diesel devil's lettuce and get some rest. Despite having read 100,000 of these Reddit stories, the woods never scared me. This night my brain decided that a reoccurring nightmare about someone walking around our tent would be a good idea. So I'm going through the cycle of dreaming that, and I've woken up to footsteps around my tent and trying to wake up my fiancé. I fail. I dream it again and eventually wake up completely to realize there's nothing there. 3 or 4 rounds into this mess, I'm waking up to these footsteps. This time I realize I'm not dreaming. There's definitely someone out there. Then I hear a deep, low, throaty growl, and I'm nearly petrified. I manage to reach over and wake my fiancé while whispering quietly, "There's something outside our tent." He wakes up, and we continue to hear something walking around, growling and snarling. We're basically wetting ourselves. We can't decide if it's something big because of the vocalizations. It sounds like it, but I'm hoping these steps are being amplified, as they generally are in the woods, and maybe this just really is 3 aggressive squirrels in a trench coat. We're trying to peek out but can't see anything. The noises move to the edge of the site, and there's a lot of snarling and animals screaming. Then silence. Then it's on the other side of the tent. This is making it really hard to decide what to do. We're trying to be silent while gathering what feeble little weapons we have. Me and my pink canister of saber pepper gel, which is obviously just going to anger the 3,000-pound prehistoric mountain lion that I'm imagining is preparing to devour my soul. With him, a few hunting knives we brought to cut bits of rope and carry in case of emergency. We don't even have the hatchet because I let him pack it while at work, which means we had 85% of the important things we needed. There's some screaming going along the edge of the site now. It sounds like every animal in the northeast of the United States is being skinned alive around our tent. I'm shaking like a leaf, and I had to stand because the adrenaline pumping felt like I smoked a Bobby Brown's lifetime worth of crack. We still cannot pinpoint where this thing is, what it is, or catch any glimpses from our tent. We're definitely gonna die in the woods here. It's late in the season, and there's maybe one other occupied site. And we showed up too late to check in, so no doubt we're about to become a couple of unidentifiable mystery moles, and I'm losing my mind. Finally, it's been a few minutes since we heard any shrieking. Last we heard, this thing sounded like a few sites away. So we decide we're gonna grab our wallets and run. I don't care how many paychecks worth of gear we have. we're gonna hit the car and the panic button. Presumably, this nature beast is crapping itself in the woods because bright lights, loud sounds, it works. And we zoom the hell out. It's like 2 a.m. We get some Slim Jims at a convenience store and go home for the night, and then gear up in the morning with some high-powered CO2 weapons, hatchets, knives, you name it, and return. We didn't find anything. We made friends with a troop of trashy trash pandas for the rest of the trip, and kind of always wondered if, perhaps it was just them in a trench coat terrorizing us that night. I guess we'll never know. I recently moved into a new city, and I was looking for a house to rent. That day, I had spent the entire afternoon looking for one until I arrived to a private neighborhood. Before entering to the main street, I had to pass through a security checkpoint, so I decided to ask there. I approached the cabin to ask security guy if he knew if there were any houses left to rent, as I stood outside the open door of the cabin. Then, a chubby 60-year-old man greeted me and told me that there weren't. I said thank you and turned around, but then I heard a sudden, "Miss? Yes?" Last night there was a power shutdown and my radio went nuts. I don't know what that time was. You think you can help me change the hour? I stood silent, still being outside the open door of the cabin, and started thinking. That morning my school had suffered a power breakdown, but it was very far from that neighborhood. It couldn't have been the same shutdown. Besides, the man said the shutdown was last night, not in the morning. I was still silent. I looked at the open door. I had to get in the cabin if I wanted to help that man, and I'm a really short girl, and he could pull me in or pull me through while I was inside. The alarms were going off in my head. I don't know how to fix a radio. He looked at me confused and then smiled. Really? Couldn't you check it at least? Move some buttons or something? I really have no idea. I've never used one in my life, I said while trying to turn around and not give a crap. Okay, don't worry about it, the man said. I rushed home still thinking about what had just happened and started remembering some things. The radio this man had was very old. It didn't have a tiny screen where you could see the time, and it looked like it didn't have wires. It looked like it was operated via battery. The power shutdown wouldn't have affected it. That had been really odd. But the scariest part is that the man looked really nice and was kind to me. I got the chills as I got home. That night I had dinner with a friend who happened to live 3 blocks away from the private neighborhood, and I told her what happened. She looked at me really impressed and told me that I made the right call, because last night there hadn't been a power shutdown in the area. So, weird radio guy, let's not meet again. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed tonight's stories. If of course you did, don't forget to drop a comment down below. My wife's actually watching this series on Netflix called You, about a creepy stalker guy. It's funny because she's actually read the book as well. It sounds like a pretty good series, and the book's pretty good as well. I've skimmed through it, but she told me much of the plot anyway. Talking about creepers got me thinking about that. Stay safe out there. There really are some creepy people out there. Huge thanks as always to my lovely patrons who help support the channel and keep things running. You guys are amazing, so thanks for everything you do. If you'd like your name in the end credits, as well as a few extra prizes, check out the link to patreon.com/mortismedia in the description. But anyway, for now guys, it's time for me to sign off. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.